Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Mold Stories. I'm Tammy, your favorite local neighborhood realtor and healthy home advocate. And today I am here with Justin Smith. I'm so excited that Justin has stepped forward to share his story. Quite a journey that he's been on himself and with his family. And so we're going to just kick right in. Justin, first of all, I'd like to start with you're on location wise south of me. Are you in Colorado Springs?
I'm in Castle Rock.
In Castle Rock. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
And so we do similar things. You're doing referral work in real estate. Do you tend to wander outside of that area very often? Do you work? How is it you work with people?
Yeah, we always have a hard time explaining what we do, just because it's not typical. I'm a real estate broker in Colorado. Um, but in 2002, my dad and I started something called the Christian Real Estate Network, which is just a network of Christian real estate agents around the country. And so what we do kind of two things. We help those agents connect together, just for engagement and fellowship and networking and just mutual support. And then the second thing we do is we help people that are looking for a Christian agent that would prefer to work with somebody that says they're a Christian, nationwide. So buyers and sellers that do that. So I don't do any work locally, actually. People ask me all the time, but I don't do anything locally. What we do is just full time. And so we've sent out probably close to about 30,000 referrals in the last 20 years. We've
Oh,
got 4,000 members around the country, and it just it's a full-time effort to handle that, work with buyers and sellers every day, and then connect the agents together in community. And so that's in a nutshell what we do.
that is fantastic. You're doing good work out there. So national, are you tied in your home then
Mhm.
all day?
I am as much as I can be, yeah, and that'll be part of the story that I share. Is so I'm kind of part-time doing this, and then part-time caregiving for my kids and family.
It's amazing. So you're a dad
Yeah.
and married and have this wonderful
Mhm.
family that you're caring for. How
Yeah.
is this tied to mold stories? You want to tell us how you began?
Yes. Um, yeah, I never expected to have this story, which I'm sure pretty much everybody says. I was very ignorant to mold and environmental issues, up until about 6, 7 years ago. And so, you want me to just kind
Yeah,
of dive in?
yeah, go
Okay.
for it.
All right. So the story for us begins, when we were living in Canyon City, Colorado. So it's just kind of southwest of Colorado Springs. And we lived down there for about 8 years, and were previously in Castle Rock, so we're now back in Castle Rock. But we were fulfilling my wife's lifelong dream of opening a youth center, and in this youth center, we were partnered with a church down there that we were going to, and this youth center was our kind of felt like our life's work. It was something that she dreamed about since she was a teenager. She was deeply impacted by a youth center in Littleton, in um, in the aftermath of the Columbine shooting, and so that was really a deeply impactful thing for her in her life. And so we went down there, opened up this youth center, and it just became this gigantic thing. We'd open up on Friday nights. We'd have 200 kids come in the door, and it just was this. It turned into my full time thing. It's not something I looked for to do, but she kind of pulled me along, and we ended up doing that. And again, yeah, it really felt like our kind of what we were built to do. It's like our life's work. Um, we were a very healthy family. We had three daughters at the time, and we would go to whatever. We'd go to the doctor once a year. We'd go to the ER for a broken arm. Really no awareness of environmental issues, at all. But around 2020, 2019-ish, yeah, started to get sick, and we really didn't know what was causing it. It took us a long time. I think it probably took us longer than most families to really identify sort of the source there. But one of the most vivid memories that I have, and we're a homeschooling family as well, so we've enabled us to travel around and do things like the youth center and things like that. And the Christian Real Estate Network allows me to work from home as well. Um, but I have this very vivid memory. It's probably one of the scariest moments of my life. We were sitting in the living room and doing homeschooling. My daughter was sitting at this table, and my wife was not in the house for some reason. And I look over and she's just collapsed on the floor. And I didn't really had no idea what had happened. We had never had any scary medical things in our history, and really none at all. And so, but I rush over to her and she's blue, she's unresponsive, she's not breathing. I can't detect a heartbeat. In that moment, I thought she just had collapsed and died. I mean, it was just really that's what it was like.
Oh my gosh.
And she, so we call paramedics, of course, and all of that. And we realized within a matter of about 10 minutes that we believe this is a seizure that's happening. And just certain little indications over after you get past that little shock period. And that's essentially what happened. We did find out that she had a seizure. No history of epilepsy, no history of epilepsy in the family. We didn't know anything about epilepsy. It was just, we then became on a crash course for that. We made a decision to not put her on medicine right away. Within another week, she had another seizure, and her seizures were very abnormal. Even neurology said this we don't really know what to do with this. We think it's epilepsy. We think it's neurological. She did have abnormal EEGs, but they're very kind of abnormal seizures. And there was one where her third seizure that lasted over 30 minutes, which is very dangerous, very, very dangerous. And the paramedics were taking her out of the house while she was still seizing. And it was just scary, really scary. And so we did start getting her on medicine. That actually controlled it. In the background, a lot of our family members were starting to have symptoms, but not really recognizing them for what they were.
What
For
kind of
me, it was
symptoms?
headaches, just like a constant headache kind of thing, dizziness, brain fog, a lot of those kind of typical things, and then just a lot of other really weird, bizarre things that you can never really put your finger on. And at the time, I chalked it up to stress from the youth center. We've got these hundreds of kids coming in the building. We've got 50 volunteers. We've got all just this massive undertaking that's taking every bit of blood, sweat, and tears we have to keep it running. And just thought, hey, this is what it is. Fast forward a few months, and my other daughter, my youngest daughter at the time, she was, I think, 6 at the time, maybe 7 at the time. And she starts having really severe GI issues. And so she's doubled over in pain all the time. And it just becomes debilitating for her. She's spending half the day in bed, really in a lot of pain, and so we do all the GI stuff. We do, we go to children's, we do all the things. She does emptying studies. She does clean outs. She does, feeding tubes to, all these different things to try to figure out what the heck's going on, with no answers, really no reason, no understanding. It's not anything serious that traditional medicine would say. And so we're working through that. We're trying to keep her regular. We're trying to do all these things and really nothing's helping that much. And then one day we were in the basement, homeschooling again, and she is on the floor having a seizure. And it was less scary in a sense because we knew what we were looking at. But still, what the heck, what are we doing here? And so we get her started on medicine right away. But with Lily, we couldn't control seizures with medication. And so they kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so she ended up getting diagnosed with epilepsy, but also non-epileptic seizures, it's a whole category that neurology doesn't know what to do with. And it's because they'll have a seizure, they'll have kind of that presentation, but they won't have electrical activity happening in the brain. So she's had multiple EEGs. She's had 12 EEGs at this point, up to present day. But some of her EEGs were not epileptic. And so they put it in the psychiatry category. And so, which is unfortunate, I think, to a degree, because it's kind of like saying it's kind of all in your head, or it's caused by PTSD. It's caused by all these kind of things. But none of those things were really true for our family. We didn't have any traumatic events, it didn't make sense. It just really didn't make sense. And in the meantime, these seizures started getting more and more severe. And we call them seizures, but sometimes the presentation would just be passing out. So she'd pass out and then be unconscious, and so that started to be a very daily thing, multiple times a day. Um, and that period of unconsciousness started getting longer and longer and longer, and to the point where there was many days where it would be 6 hours of just unconscious, totally unresponsive. And we kind of learned over time, like we got to stop taking her to the ER. Like they don't do anything there. There's no point. We've had so many inpatient stays now with children's, and they just are like, we don't know what to do with her. She needs therapy. All these things, which is just unfortunate. And so when it got to absolute worst, she would have not just periods of unconsciousness, but she'd have hallucinations. Um, she'd have motor movement while she was unconscious. So it it would be things like, I don't want to get into too much detail here, but like she would pass out and then start rolling across the floor. But she's totally unaware of what's happening, completely unaware. And in some senses, it would almost appear like some kind of like a mental disorder or something like that. But again, she's unconscious, and so um, yeah, it became serious. Obviously, it's totally debilitating for her. At one point, she's kind of stopped being able to walk for most periods of time, and we had so many traumatic things that would happen over this period of probably 6 months that this kind of kept escalating. And it would just be things like, she'd feel pretty good for a couple hours in the day, and she'd go across the street to get the mail, and we'd be like, "Where'd Lily go?" And she's passed out in the middle of the street. Just so many things like that happen. So many inpatient stays, so many ambulance rides, so many of those things, and that just I we so what happened in that period? We had to quit the youth center. This turned into our full-time thing all of a sudden, and it was life-changing, for so many different reasons. In the middle of that, we actually got pregnant again, and so we have a baby, and I'm sorry, we have two babies at that point. And so we're trying to. We just life is very chaotic at that point. But at one point, we start getting so desperate that we're like, okay, let's look at the Mayo Clinic, and let's look at all these other, how do we escalate past traditional medicine? And this is where it really just took us a long and painful amount of time to find the right kind of people, the right kind of doctors, to tell us. We had people tell us, "Have you looked at environmental things?" And but most of the time, people are thinking like, "Have you looked at your water? Do you have really bad radon? Do you have whatever? Are you too close to a cell phone tower?" It's like all these just kind of they sound conspiracy-ish, and in the meantime we're already like working with 12 different doctors. We're submitting them to every test known to man. And we're trying to just follow the sources that we would traditionally trust, in something like this. You're doing just everything you possibly can. You're killing yourself to try to get answers. And we finally had two separate doctors, one in particular here, that's up in Greenwood Village, that mentioned the M word for the first time, and we thought she was crazy. I thought she was crazy. Lori was my wife was a lot more open to it, but it was very that first call felt very cold and felt very. It was just very clinical, and it was like, yes, it might be mold, and by the way, you might have to evacuate your house. You might have to throw away half your things, And as you're going through just such trauma, I guess that's like the last thing. I mean, you just piling on, piling on, piling on. And so I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I was like, I just do not want to hear that. It's just unbelievable. I don't want to hear that. In parallel with that, we had another doctor that actually we were kind of getting somewhere with another doctor, and it was a complex medical clinic also based in Denver. And they kind of explained to us with Lily that she's the one that had the worst symptoms, that you're kind of looking at like an encephalopathy. So it's not like a encephalitis, which is some people kind of might be familiar with that, but it's basically like they explained it. Her brain's on fire. Like that blood-brain barrier has been breached somehow. We don't know how, and it's just causing this intense inflammation, and so it's causing in psychiatric things and things like that. But going back to the mold thing, we said, okay, fine, let's try to pursue this. And so we actually called in a company and didn't know who to call, didn't know anything about it. And so we brought in a company that I probably would never use again. Um, but they actually did find a hidden leak. So part of the story is that those two daughters shared a bedroom in a basement with an egress window. And every time we'd get a heavy rain, we got a lot of monsoon rains down there in southern Colorado. Every time it would rain, that window would leak, and a little bit of water would come in. And like I think probably 90% of the country or whatever, most people just like, oh, just put a towel on it. We're just make sure that it's just dry. That's kind of what you do. And
Mhm.
so we did that for years. It was just every month or two, we'd get moisture in there and we'd dry it off. But what we didn't realize is that there was hidden moisture, obviously trapped behind that wall, that drywall. And so we discovered that. But it was just like a light bulb all of a sudden. We had this common denominator. These are my two daughters that are very, very sick with seizures and all these other issues. And it just seemed like, oh my gosh, we found it. And so that began our mold journey, really was that process of uncovering that window, doing a remediation, doing the best we could with a remediation, kind of trying to learn this whole process of small particle cleaning and learning how to at the time we would have done things so differently now based on what we know now. It's just, and that's what I've kind of learned overall with this whole journey is that it's just you never stop learning, and it just the journey never really ends, especially once you've had a major, what I call a priming event.
Yeah.
When you have a really serious exposure, it can become you're more sensitive. You're just more sensitive down the road. And so we have many more stories that just even leading up to the present day, which is another whole nother conversation, I think. But anyway, yeah, we found that, remediated, and really felt like that was kind of the answer, and to a large degree it was. We and we did so many crazy things. We had an RV on the side yard that we bought so that our kids could move into that, and so we could still sort of be at the property while my wife and I and our little kids could stay on the top floor. We never would have done that, knowing what we know now. But yeah, we that's trying to decide where to go with the story now. We did see some slight relief there once we did that remediation and moved back in, but what really ended up happening is, in retrospect, we see that the remediation basically failed, and the house had a lot more problems that we were so hyper focused on this one little area, thinking, we fixed this problem, without really doing a proper inspection on the rest of the house,
Mhm.
without really knowing what other kind of tests to do, without really doing just some really fundamental things like replacing flooring, and some other things that we really should have done in the first place. And so because of that, we got back into the house and it really didn't get better. In some ways, you could say it even got worse. And so we became increasingly desperate at that point, and kind of so there was one point where we were sitting in the backyard. I remember just so vividly, and I grabbed a blank printer paper, and I wrote down the names of every person in our family, and I started listing symptoms just off the top of my head. And when and I'm doing two columns on the page, and I'm getting all the way down, all the way down, all the way down, filling up the first side, turning it over, continue filling it out, and I just like we are screwed. We have a serious problem here, and we have to take drastic action. And so that's when we made a decision. We're going to evacuate our house, and we did. That's what we did. That night, we packed up the few things that we thought we could kind of safely clean, and we moved out of the house, and moved temporarily somewhere for a few weeks, and then ultimately decided we really could not find a good enough house in Canyon City that would fit our growing family and also be clean enough. We felt, just even without our knowledge that we have now, we just didn't feel like we found the right place. And so we were in Denver constantly because of medical issues and because my wife's family was up here. And so we made the decision to move actually back to Castle Rock. And to speed up the story, once we found a decent house, and we did a lot of testing on a lot of houses. And but the very short version is that my daughter Lily in particular, within about 3 weeks was probably 70-80% better. And so,
Whoa.
yeah, so just that longer term removal from exposure was um, gigantic. It really it unlocked so many answers for us, for our family, and a lot of the symptoms that my wife and I were having, and all those things that you don't, as you have kids, you just put all of your own issues on the back burner. You just don't think about the things that you're going through. And I mean, my list of symptoms was a dozen or more. My wife's were probably 20 or more. And every single kid in the family had an issue, and we've since realized that we both have the HLA genes, that so our kids are doomed. Every single one of our kids are going to have this genetic predisposition
Hmm.
towards biotoxin illness, and so, but at the time we just knew that we got out of exposure, or at least enough exposure to be feeling this much better. And so, um, anyway, that's the initial story.
Wow, it's such an incredible journey. I mean, you have
Yeah.
overcome some of the scariest things, some of the scariest stories that I've heard, and I've been
Yeah.
hearing some really scary things. And I think the
Yeah.
hardest dynamic of this is the traditional allopathic medicine has not wrapped around this happening, and it's
Yeah.
happening in Colorado. My experience is that it's growing. It's happening
Hmm.
more and more frequently, and I don't know necessarily that it's always the genetic predisposition that is leading to it, right? Because not everybody's testing, but it's definitely a growing problem. And our kids seem to be taking the brunt of it. It's so hard for us to identify what's happening and make a change fast enough, right? Until
Hmm.
it becomes so concentrated.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm so, so sorry for your family having to go through that. And
Hmm.
it's just awful. I'm
Yeah.
glad that you found a safe
Mhm.
home. And so you're
Mhm.
six altogether. Is this
We're
right?
six now. That's
Yeah.
right.
Well, just
So we had those
happy.
older three. We had that 7 year gap, and then we had three more. So my youngest now is 5.
Okay. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Good on you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as
So
you've been navigating life in your new home, how long have you been there now?
I want to say 4 years, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right.
How often do you see a resurfacing of symptoms
Yeah.
in your
Gosh,
life?
it's hard. Because I know this is not what people want to hear. It's not what I want to hear. Because once you have that, like I said, that kind of priming event, I do feel like the susceptibility is higher. I just feel that it is. Um, part of what Lily ended up getting diagnosed with is PANDAS,
Mhm.
which is pediatric acute neuropsychiatric syndrome. And then the S on the PANDAS is caused by strep specifically. That's the thing that's a little bit more recognized by traditional medicine. And there's been some really great work in the last 3 years. There's been great work and a lot more adoption. When we first took that diagnosis to a traditional doctor, they wrote us off completely. Children's Hospital said, no, that's not a thing. And we said, well, Stanford says it's a thing. Some of these other huge hospitals, medical clinics say that it's a thing. Um, but that's what she ended up getting diagnosed with. And that's, we hear that a lot. So a lot of the families that we talk to and work with, that's what a lot of times they're dealing with. And it's a horrible syndrome to deal with. And so just really quick, and I'll get to your question, but
Yeah.
really quick, the symptoms on that are basically they call it acute because it just happens very rapidly. It's like a sudden onset of neuropsychiatric symptoms, and so you might have a very neurotypical, let's say 6 year old, and all of a sudden something snaps, and then sometimes it could be caused by strep. That's the most commonly recognized one, but it can be caused by a number of other things, infections. and things like that. But essentially, your immune system is attacking your brain. The blood-brain barrier becomes breached somehow, and then your immune system is attacking your brain. And so it's somewhat in the it's a neuroimmune category, but it's a little bit in the autoimmune category as well. But you'll have a very neurotypical 6-year-old that all of a sudden is suicidal. All of a sudden is they're in such a rage that they just want to hurt everybody. They might want to just run away. Like just that I'll get to that part of our story, but one of my sons has been diagnosed PANS as well, and there was periods of time where we had to guard the door because he would literally just go run off and just keep going and not come back. Um, and they're not really aware of what they're doing. It's just their brains are so inflamed that they're all this kid that you knew all of a sudden is a completely different child. And so I'm trying to figure out where I was kind of going with that, but that became part of the diagnosis for my daughter Lily. And so that's what we ended up kind of mostly treating as we got into the new house. And so she would actually still have these flares, especially when she was exposed to some kind of virus or some kind of infection, something like that. So that became the ongoing thing that we can kind of continue to deal with, and to a degree are still dealing with today. Um, but as you encounter other exposures, so like a example, my daughter Abby, who is the one that had the initial seizure, she's a little bit of a canary for us. Like she's had periods now where she'll walk into a building that we really don't realize immediately, but discover is very, very water damaged. And she'll actually have a seizure. She'll have a epileptic seizure. And so those things are still real, those symptoms have become less and less and less as we continue to heal our bodies, continue to try to be in safe spaces and things like that. But it is a continual battle. It just is. And I don't want that to be true. I want this to say, okay, this was this chapter of our lives, and now we're moving on. And the reality has been a lot more messy than that, to kind of answer your question. And so, yeah, like we just just this last year, we discovered a leak under a toilet that was hidden. And I do my best. Like I've bought all the tools now. I've done many hundreds of hours of inspection training and all these different things, mostly for our own family, and still miss things.
Sure.
And so we found a leak under a toilet, and it had gone under. With the subfloor, and we had to do a full remediation. But leading up to that, 4 or 5 months, we started seeing symptoms again, and just could not figure out what has been going on. And part of that was my son Judah, um, um, all of a sudden having PANS, and having this diagnosis this last year. And so we doing much better now, but had a period of multiple months where we were kind of back in crisis mode with him. Thankfully, he didn't have any seizures at all, but pretty severe, episodes and flares of PANS. And so it is a kind of unfortunately, a kind of a
Yeah.
constant thing. And and there's always the question that one of the things when we talk to other families, it's, are you being exposed at our home? Is it at our school? Is it at our church? Is it and those are really hard questions to answer.
Right.
About a year ago, we were going to a church here in Castle Rock, and my daughter Lily started having seizures every time we were in the building. And she would, she'd pass out, or she would feel just so dizzy that she was kind of almost not conscious. And we just tried to ignore it, put our heads in the sand, and then finally realized, okay, there's common denominator here. And it's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. We were very connected with that community, and had to say, we can't be in this building anymore.
Mm.
So that's part of the ongoing thing that is so heartbreaking about this journey is there's a continual cost to it. And I'd rather people hear that up front
Yeah.
than hear that once you find this one thing, it's gonna all go away, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it might be something as simple as like chemical sensitivity, which we all have. I mean, so many people through this journey have, we'll walk into somebody's house or something, and they have a plug-in air freshener, and we like literally can't spend more than 30 seconds in there. I cannot handle this. And it
Yeah.
sounds so silly,
Yeah.
to the average person. But you just can't do it.
Completely
And
overwhelming
so,
systems. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
So
is.
there's a lot of implications. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah.
But
I love that you're sharing it though, as much as we don't want to hear it. It is so important that we
yeah,
recognize that there's so many people going down the rabbit hole. That's what I call it. Once we go down the rabbit hole, there's so
yeah,
many conflicting
yeah,
dynamics, so much information, and it's
yeah.
it is so bio individual of a journey. We are all
Hmm.
completely unique. We've been experiencing and exposed to different things that complicate the layers of what it's going to take for
Yeah,
us to heal.
yeah.
And it takes time. It took our whole lives to get to the point where we were at the tipping
Yeah.
point. You call it your priming event, right?
Hmm.
Once we hit that tipping point, you don't just go back.
Yeah.
Now you're starting a whole nother journey. It's like you walk through this door and we've been given something that is hard. It's so hard. It's hard for families. It's hard on relationships. It's hard
Yeah.
financially.
Yeah.
So hard emotionally. The trauma that comes from this is very intense. And it's very
Hmm.
because we're no longer in control of our environment,
Yeah.
which in
Yeah.
our own home.
What's the place where you're supposed to feel
Yeah.
safety, refuge? Yeah.
Yes. It is so very intense. And so I know that there's more power in telling the truth around it and saying it takes time and it's going to take time and
Yeah.
re-exposures cause re-inflammation. Our body's going to
Hmm.
respond to that. And so the
Yeah.
best things that we can do is stay informed, right? Stay in front of it,
Hmm.
slow down, be intentional.
Yeah.
If you were to look back now, what choices do you think you would make
Mhm.
differently?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, um, yeah. I mean, knowing what we know now, of course, yeah, we would have done things quite a bit differently. I think probably, and I don't even know if we could have found somebody, but finding somebody that doing a true inspection. I
Hmm.
think that's more of a long term. It's a very difficult process. It just is. There's no perfect tests. There's no perfect inspection. There's no like surefire way to find every problem with the house. Our structures are so complex, and in our society, the way we are, we insist on living in mini mansions. Honestly, I mean, we live in gigantic structures compared to the rest of the world, compared to history. And so they're so complex, so many different things that can fail. And so I think a really just a much better inspection. So part of the story I didn't get into was this youth center is on the old. It's right on the main street, like the old main street of Canyon City. So like you think of an old West town,
Yeah.
it was right on that main strip. This building is 150 plus years old. It's 10,000 square feet. It's probably the most water damaged building I've ever been in. I mean, literally, that roof has failed 100 times, and we even redid a roof completely. But we have videos of we were redoing the roof, and we kind of insisted on getting volunteers to do it because it's just so expensive, and we're a nonprofit. But we resheath the roof, and before it gets covered, we have a monsoon rain. And so there's probably 500 OSB boards up on the roof because it's a gigantic building. That's all that's up there. And so we have videos of us walking through the building and there's just water pouring out. And it's pouring out onto this drop ceiling that's through the whole building. And it's so water damage, just wild. And one thing we looked back on, which was so fascinating, we looked back at the dates and our pictures. We had a work day not long after we completed the roof. We had a work day where we took down every drop ceiling tile inside that building. We never counted them. There must have been close to 1,000 of those things in there. And we took off every single one because there's so much debris on the tops of them from falling on the roof. And we cleaned them, which was the stupidest thing. So we carried these drop ceiling tiles into the alley, brushed, whatever, decades of dust and debris off of them. It was so dusty in there that you couldn't even see. Almost none of us wore masks. But I found a picture of my daughter Abby in the alley wiping dust into trash cans, and she had a little handkerchief over her mouth, and that's it. Um, 2 days later is when she had her seizure, her first one. It's just, those are the kind of things, it's like, as a dad, you kill yourself over.
Mm.
And so it's stuff like that, is just, don't be stupid, with environmental issues. You have to take things seriously, so that's the overall message to my, previous self, is just take things seriously. Take dust, take mold, take any kind of those things, those seriously. The one other thing that, part of the puzzle for us, was endotoxins as well.
Talk a little bit about
And
that.
yeah,
When you
so
say endotoxins, where are we going?
yeah, yes. So, um, it just, it says, very much simplify it. I'm talking like sewer gas, basically, just to very much oversimplify it. But it's a gram-negative bacteria that comes often from sewer gas and other kind of exposures like that. But as we were doing our remediation, it was the summertime, and we had to turn off our HVAC. And this is, so we were like 3, 4 weeks in the middle, 100-degree heat. HVAC is off inside the house, and it is just sweltering inside the house. And during that time, we are getting just an incredibly intense sewer gas smell inside of our house in Canyon City, that we were trying to remediate. And it's just overwhelming. And we can't identify a leak. We can't identify anything. We're like, gosh, it's just because it's so hot. It's just whatever. Sewage is cooking off inside of our pipes or something.
Sure.
We had no idea. But I started doing some Googling one day, and I'm like trying to diagnose this thing. So I get up on our roof, and you have things on your roof called sewer vents, and this allows makeup air to come inside of the sewer system, inside of your vent pipes. I didn't know any of this stuff. Like, I'm not a technical person. I'm not I'm not a contractor kind of person at all. And so, but I get up there, and I see all these, pipes that I believe are sewer vents, and there's caps on them. And I texted a friend of mine that knows about that kind of thing. I'm like, what are these? Why is there PVC coming out of our roof with caps? And he said, oh my gosh. He said, those are your sewer vent pipes, and they're supposed to be exposed. Like, they're supposed to be just a raw pipe with a hole in the top. And he said, that's it. Like, you found part of your issue. And part of the only clue that I can think back on, and I talk to a lot of people about this now, is if you ever hear your toilet kind of making a sucking noise or a gurgling noise,
Yeah.
it's trying to find air, in order to make that full flush, like that complete flush. And that's what that vent is supposed to do. It's introducing air into that vent system in order for the P traps to completely clean out, and all things like that. But so essentially, what happened, what we believe is the builder, what they do is they cap those pipes, and they do tests, pressure tests, to make sure that there's nothing leaking in the system. They're supposed to cut them off before people get in the house, and they never cut ours off. And so that introduced, I think, an extreme level of endotoxins into the home. And that had happened since day one the house was built, not necessarily just when the house was hot. That's just how we identified that problem. And so we believe very strongly that was another thing that led to a lot of our issues. And so, yeah, it's a whole nother conversation. That's a major thing that I think people need to be watching, and paying attention to as in part of that process. So, yeah, we probably would have left the house, like, knowing all those things. We probably would have evacuated just earlier. We would have left earlier. The other thing, though, like, just from a practical standpoint, we probably got rid of 2/3 of what we owned. I feel a little bit more comfortable now with individual items and kind of how you deal with that. That's one of the things. Of course, the relational, financial, all these other crazy things. But a lot of times people fixate on their stuff as they're going through this process, and it becomes very paralyzing. And some people we talk to, that's just no big deal. And other people, it's like they literally feel paralyzed. They can't do anything because it's like, well, I have all my things. I can't just throw them all away.
Right.
Um, and so the reality is that you can actually clean a lot more than depending on you may read something different online,
Yeah.
but over time and after working with a lot of families and things like that, you can save your clothes. You can really save anything. You can wash. The hard stuff is just the big stuff. It's the big fabric couch, and things like that. There's definitely things that are harder. So like one regret I had is I had an entire library of books that
Mm,
I got rid of because I thought that was the right thing to do. I
yeah.
think in retrospect, I would have probably stored them and kind of dealt with them later instead
Yeah.
of doing that. But that was for me one of the heartbreaking things for me personally,
Yeah.
um, going through that. But so yeah, I don't know, 100 other lessons there, but
Yeah.
those are the things that come to mind.
Yeah.
Mm,
One of the things that's come up repeatedly in these is that it's not always just mold. Usually,
mm,
there's all these multiple layers of
yeah.
complications, toxins that are in our environment that we're taking in at some level. I
Mm,
would say for
mhm,
me, it was pesticides and herbicides when we lived in the country, not
mm.
realizing how much of it was in our water and taking it in for
Wow.
16 years,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
already my system's a mess, and so is both my kids, right?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so that I mean, you learn these things as you go, giving ourselves some grace, realizing we do the best that we
Hmm.
can with what we
Yeah.
know at the time. You
Yeah.
and I'm so sorry, Luna, you and your wife are great parents, and you gave
Hmm.
this 100% of everything that you had, and trying to learn and
Yeah.
understand what is happening when everything
Yeah.
is contradicting and confusing and overwhelming.
Hmm.
You did
And you're walking around in a fog,
and you're in a
too.
fog too. Yeah,
Just personally. Yeah. Yeah.
right. And when
Gosh.
you're
Yeah.
in that state, I don't think people realize we say brain fog, and I feel like it's such a
Mhm.
small word
Yeah.
to wrap
Yeah.
around what's actually happening in your brain, which for me
Yeah.
became like this big. Like
Hmm.
and even now, if I get exposed, my ability to complete sentences just whoosh, goes away.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
gone.
Yep.
And
Yep.
refined words, it's like I have no idea what I'm saying. I'm not very good right now, which in real estate is fun when I try to talk to people. It's like I don't know. I was in a multiple
Yeah.
house last
Oh
night.
my gosh. Yeah.
And
Well.
so it's scary, and being able to see outside of that funnel to all of the things that you can see today, looking back,
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
it, give yourself some grace and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and in time, I can say 10 years out of mine that it gets better. It keeps getting better. The more you keep
Yeah.
making decisions for your family, it just keeps unfolding and you keep healing and you keep making differences in other people's lives by sharing your story, whether if
Yeah.
that's all you did on the mold path, that is powerful. Just keep
Yeah.
talking, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. That's what, I mean, so many people in this world, or even people that decide to go into it professionally,
Hmm.
which all the best ones, in my opinion, are ones that have personal stories.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it gives, I remember another distinct memory was following an ambulance down a hill to the hospital, and I'm in the car by myself, and I'm really shouting at God, like, God, what is going on here? And I remember just distinctly telling God, if you can't redeem this in some way, I can't bear it. Like I can't bear. There has to be some meaning behind this. There's something that you can redeem. Um, and it didn't come. It. I think God brought that to memory a few years later when I started doing a lot of classes and I started doing things. And my wife and I, it was really hard. But about a year after we moved back to Castle Rock, we felt like we had enough capacity emotionally to tell our story a
Hmm.
little bit. And so we just made a single YouTube video, and it was just us, and it was, meandering and probably didn't make sense to a lot of people except us, but it was very healing for us to kind of get that out there. But once we did that, really, really our phones kind of started ringing off the hook, with people that have had the similar story, or are right in the middle of it and just need help. And that's God brought that memory back to me at that time in the car. That hey, this is one of the ways I'm going to redeem this story is you're going to be able to help other people and give them emotional support. Give them, so that's a lot of what my wife and I do. And we don't do it professionally. We don't do it. We don't charge anything or anything. It's just but we get so many phone calls from families that somehow heard our story or something, and we were able to kind of hold their hands through it, and sometimes not in very practical ways. Sometimes it's just say, we understand and we love you, and trust your instincts. Don't believe the doctor that says you're crazy, let's go find you another doctor that's going to actually treat underlying causes and things like that. And so that's been very rewarding, and but also hard. It's also hard, as I'm sure there's a cost to that, because you're re-entering a lot of traumatic things, because you're doing it with them, and so it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, and there's some weeks where we feel like we don't have capacity for it emotionally, and we just yeah, reliving a lot of those things are difficult, and we tend to talk. I don't know how it's happened. I really don't, but God's just put a lot of families in our path where there's a lot of the really extreme medical stuff that you know um, really they have no one else to turn to. So we connected with a family quite recently in Castle Rock that has 5 kids, multiple kids with PANS. One of their daughters almost died. Um, and no one understands what they're going through. No one, and so we're able to step into that story and say, we went through 90% of what you went through. And so we get it, and we may not be able to fix all your problems, but we understand it, and we can hug you and cry with you and empathize with you and try to point you in the right direction. And
Yeah.
so that's become a rewarding part of the journey.
Yeah. And there's a lot in being able to hold space like that, the space from true,
Yeah.
deep understanding. Having somebody hold space for you that really understands what you're
Mhm.
going through is so healing. It is so
Yeah.
healing and feels safe out of this world that suddenly feels incredibly unsafe. Then
Mhm.
it's like I have this one safe space. So thank you for doing that for people who need it.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. So what's next for
Yeah.
you?
It depends on when you ask me that. Sometimes it does feel like survival, we it's man, it's complicated with kids. It's
Mhm.
really complex with young kids. And so, you know, we have a couple kids with autism as well. And so life is complex for us. It just is. I think for the very foreseeable future, we will be kind of doing what we're doing, and um, trying to help families where we're able to. But one of the things that is a very real thing, which I haven't talked to too many people that have gone through this, but it's when you have older teenagers that have gone through these complex medical issues, and you know how susceptible they are, but they don't even quite have the full awareness of what they've been through, and what their future might look like. I feel this great responsibility to educate them, on you know whatever background or what am I trying to say, like methodology you come from, so like for us we describe it as SIRS, but like that SIRS lifestyle, like, are you equipped as a young adult to be able to know how to listen to your body? Are you equipped to know what to do if you have an exposure? Those are scary things, scary things to be thinking about. And there was a long period of time where, like, gosh, are ever any of these kids going to ever be able to be independent, of
Right.
us,
Yeah.
um, and so that's a huge thing kind of on my mind lately is helping young adults launch that. They're going to be looking at the world differently than a lot of other people, and we're worried, you're worried about
Yeah.
exposures and what their quality of life might look like. And then for the younger kids too, is like you worry about what did exposure do to them at an early age, and what that kind of looks like. And I have a huge heart for families that have young kids because how do you get young kids to take CSM or Wellcall or whatever, charcoal binders or whatever? There's just like very real challenges with that. Very real challenges. The good thing is the younger kiddos seem to bounce back pretty well from those types of interventions. But yeah, yeah, I'd love to say that we're like riding into the sunset kind of thing, but it's man, we know that there will be challenges ahead. We just do, and so we're trying to like walk walk out life in hope. Try to serve people that God puts in our path, and kind of go from there.
Walk out life in hope. And that just like,
Yeah.
I just totally, I
Yeah.
love that so much. Justin, I'm so grateful for you sharing your story. If people did want to reach out to you, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. Just email would be good. So Justin at hismove.com. Would be happy to talk to anybody or share a story more.
That's fantastic. Okay.